Catalyst, a person or thing that precipitates an event and triggers a vast increase in the rate of progress. Over the last 10 years, Spokane, Washington, and the Inland Empire have experienced a rate of growth that has never occurred in the past. As a native growing up in a family of developers, I have always been intrigued by our city and the people who are responsible for our growth. Up until now, there has never been a voice of progress and development. Catalyst. This is the place where you will meet all the players responsible for the growth and development of our beautiful cities and this region. This is not just another local podcast. This is The Catalyst. And I'm your host, Bruce Van Cott. Hey, Spokane, this is Bruce Van Cott with The Catalyst Podcast. I've got Jordan and Joel Tampien here from 4 Degrees Real Estate. They are serial entrepreneurs here in Spokane, working in many different industries and really making a huge difference in the community from a development standpoint right now. How are you guys doing today?
Really good. Thanks for having us, man.
Yeah, awesome.
Watch the first two. They look so good. It's hard to compete with that sometimes.
Well, at least, I think it's going to make a difference because we got you guys' Brick West beer on the show today, right?
I feel like they're all going to call and ask for one now instead of water, but I'm telling you.
They should. They should. So let's jump right in. We're in episode 3. 4 Degrees, awesome company. I think everybody's seen you guys' signs or someone's brokerage sign around. Tell us a little bit about the company. You guys are a real estate company. You guys do brokerage, residential brokerage, a little bit of commercial brokerage, a lot of commercial brokerage on your side, property management, and development. So tell us about the infamous trip to Mexico that you guys had and how this whole thing started. You said you defer to Joel for this one. So
I'm a man of few words. So I thought Joel would really kick this one off.
Let's
well, we all know, if you guys know us, George's the storyteller.
Oh.
However, it was we went down to Mexico, I guess it was about 5-6 years ago for our oldest brother's wedding. And if you know Jordan at all, he's one of those guys who has like 1,000 ideas almost daily, if not weekly. And so we were sitting by the pool one day, and what is now 4 Degrees today, he was drawing up kind of like a napkin sketch of like, hey, we could do this thing and we could do that thing and we could do all these things. But at the same time, I was super content with my job in the military. Like I was working with 5th Special Forces Group, doing some really awesome things. But of course we were trapped there at the pool, and I had no choice but to listen. So he just kind of kept going on and on and on about it. And logically, I'm a very logical thinker. It sounded like it would make sense. And so it wasn't until probably 3 or 4 months later, out of the blue to Jord, I gave him a call. I was like, okay, I think we want to do this thing.
So,
go ahead.
So it didn't happen right down there. So you had to think on it a little bit.
Hey, Bruce, no good sale happens on the spot. So pitched him on it, and then he calls me 3 months later and goes, man, we're ready. And I go, for what? You guys coming to visit? And he goes, no, start the business. And it took me like 15 seconds to rack my brain about which business.
So you were on the next idea already.
Oh, yeah. And then, lo and behold, 3 months later, came to town and 4 Degrees was created.
So where were you? You weren't in Spokane. Where were you prior to that?
No, so Julie and I and the family were over at Fort Campbell. We were active duty military. We were serving with 5th Special Forces Group at the time.
Where's Fort Campbell at?
Over in Kentucky.
Oh, so quite the move then.
Oh yeah, quite the move. But I think at that time we were used to, traveling around. We had lived in, 6 or 7 different locations, at the time with the military. So
it must have been a pretty intriguing idea to, pack everything up and say, hey, we're heading off to start this business.
Yeah, back home. And I think that was probably one of the biggest pulls. And George probably has his own reasons for why he was, selling it so hard to me. But that was one of the biggest pulls. His family was back here, and we knew ultimately we wanted to bring the kids back around parents and cousins and aunts and uncles. And this sounded like a really good opportunity to do that.
Yeah, when we sat there, how many deployments did you do?
I did one, and then Julie did one.
Yeah.
So that's probably what he was thinking.
Well, and I was like, man, what's something you can do? And then I was like, well, he's not going to go airborne out of here. Skydiving's not huge yet. And then I went into like, okay, what do you do? And he goes, logistics. I'm like, oh my God, I'm struggling with these units I have now. Like, what if we just did this on steroids? And that's kind of what the basics of it was. When we started, we had the 20...
I think it was 22 units.
22 units I had. And we just opened Backyard Public House. You can try that one. It's opened that one. And then it was like, no, let's do this. And the next 6 months were like the darkest 6 months ever. You're like waiting for a phone to ring. You're waiting for that next call. And it was just that kind of diligence to what we originally kind of talked about that.
Yeah, and that was one of the things too. I was trying to figure out, well, Jordan, what do you want me to be a property manager or run this company, but I do these things in the military. So trying to figure out like what were the skill sets that I was learning over here, which ones could I bring and apply in the civilian world or with this business?
So probably a lot of SOP, standard operating procedures.
Oh, absolutely. You know how that goes in the 4 Degrees office. I think you say that too often in the 4 Degrees office. Some people start twitching, maybe get a little PTSD.
Oh, guaranteed.
Yeah.
I do.
They're not super excited about that. But yeah, it's bringing the systems to play. It's more concerned with like the health and the welfare of the organization versus what Jordan kind of works on, which is the kind of the vision.
Yeah, and it's a hard one because I realized I could have grown a 4 Degrees. It just wouldn't have sustained.
Absolutely.
Like I could have gone in, built it. It would have grown, probably similar, and then it would have slowly faded with my whim, right? And that's where Joel brings that anchor, which has been the yin and the yang, right? So,
well, that's awesome, and that's what's fun about having you guys out here. We've had some great, guests on the podcast. Definitely had a couple brothers that are out working as partners. So, I'm sure you guys have a much longer background, a lot more stories than some of these guys do. But anyway, so Jordan, tell me a little bit about. You like you said, you started off with 22 units. That's kind of where this all came from. How did you start off in the real estate business?
Yeah, it's kind of a fun one, right? So I basically consider myself somebody that's curious about life. So I go in, if I think I like something, I try it. And so I was in law school, wrapping up my law degree in MBA.
JD MBA.
Oh, yeah.
Gonzaga?
Oh, those are more acronyms. I try not to speak in acronyms now because of Joel.
Maybe you should
That's a
ask
tough
him
program.
you should ask him why he got his MBA.
Yeah.
We'll get back to that.
Yeah.
That derails the story. And so wrapped those up, got out in 2010. Nothing was hiring in 2010. It was the bane of existence, right? Probably one of the depths of the recession, and got hired on a nonprofit that had about 500 units, and I was able to work with them to take a losing portfolio to where now it funds a lot of the activities they do in Spokane. And I thought, man, if I could do that here, why can't I do that at a different level? And again, curiosity struck. Whitney, my wife, went and decided to get her master's in teaching. So I would just be sitting at home, and she's like, you already look at these houses, just get your license. They waived everything, and it went from 10 deals the first year to 30 deals the next year to 50 deals the next year, all while working part-time. And it was great. We were able to reinvest. If you ever heard of Flat 4 Photo Booth, photography and photo booth, that was one of our first businesses. We saw, we had some really awesome friends start one. I thought, man, you could just do that a little better. And so we introduced it. All of a sudden ended up doing 300 to 400 events a year.
Wow.
With 4 photo booths, staff. Half my family staffed it, which is cool. But
that seems like a reoccurring theme in business for you.
Getting my family to staff it. Yeah. You got to be picky.
They're good,
right?
though.
Yeah, right. And it just rolled into that where I'm like, we didn't need it. So we just kept buying buildings, and there wasn't any literature behind it. There was no real reason except for felt like what was a good deal. And then what rolled into it was like, hey, let's sell these and get a better deal. And that was kind of the existence of it. And so I feel like if you ever seen the movie Slumdog Millionaire?
Yeah.
I feel like that's my story. Is like some people ask me a question. I'm like, oh, they have no idea. I just researched for like 2 weeks on that, like 2 weeks ago. And that's what it ends up being, is this story of connecting people, connecting experience, and creating opportunity. And so it literally led into that. And now we own the units, fast forward. And it just, in my head, it just didn't not make sense. Like, we can introduce something. We have these awesome players in the community. What if we could help grow what it is? I wanted to invest in properties, didn't know where to look.
I was going to say, so tell me a little bit about, going back to Mexico and 4 Degrees, the name, how that came to be.
So why we own a brewery now is all my good names have always come a little tipsy. And so we were flying back from Iceland, and they have a brand called 66 Degrees North. Okay. And I worked in government when I was working full-time at WSU, and everything was so separated. So you'd have these awesome talent. You had the most talent pool of anything I've ever seen, but nobody talked to each other because they were in silos or different divisions. And I thought, man, what's something where they could still be different yet collaborate? And the word degrees, when I saw it, I just saw degrees, and it made a ton of sense. And then number 4 is a lucky number we have. It was a flat we lived in London. It just carried a lot of weight, and then Joel didn't say no. So there goes 4 Degrees Real Estate. And then I also wanted to name, you could talk about. Somebody would ask you about, why'd you name it that? And oh my God, Tampien Real Estate would not have been the name that prompted that conversation. So kind of grew from there, and then the number and the logo has taken its own path. So.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit, Joel, about you guys definitely play, different roles in the company. And, starting off, I know you guys have graduated to a lot of different, industries and a lot of different business, but I think it all stems back to the idea of Jordan going out and developing business and Joel managing it and taking care of it. So tell me if I'm wrong or if I'm right, and talk about your role and kind of how the military prepared you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're definitely right. Right out of the military, though, we were very intertwined. We were crossing each other's paths, and it was because we didn't really know what we were doing at the beginning, to be honest.
Sure. He
wasn't doing sales, and so I can vividly remember, this is only 5 years ago, but I can vividly remember going to open houses, grabbing like a batch of cookies and some waters, and we go and just sit there and be like, all right, well, this is something we're supposed to do as agents, and we're just hanging out right now because no phone calls are coming in.
So are you licensed?
I am. I'm a licensed agent. So I think I have a couple deals under my belt, but nothing to brag about.
You capped out?
Totally. Nice. Yeah. I just capped myself at the beginning of the year. So at the very beginning, it was very much, we were like jumping over each other. We were just trying to make things work or get things done, essentially. It probably took a good 2 years-ish, maybe 2.5 years to start defining and seeing what those clear lanes were. Like, what is your role? What is my role? And I think at that point, I threw him into, we have a task organization chart for our organization. And I put him in a cloud. And it was just kind of like a joke at the beginning, but over every single year, it makes more and more sense because that's where we want Jordan. He is at his highest and best when he's 30,000 feet above what's going on. He's able to see opportunities, connect people with opportunities. And so that's the best for the organization. And for me, when you say, how did the military prepare you? Well, I would say one of the jobs, my very first job was an executive officer of 230 soldiers. I was in charge of training, in charge of the budget, in charge of, I think we had 160 rolling stock. So there's a lot of equipment responsibility. That was my first job. And so there's the same thing coming here. There's your budget you're responsible for. There's people you're responsible for. And how do you sustain and continue to provide purpose, direction, and motivation for the team in order for them to feel the wins, right? And so that's where I feel like my focus is more the health and welfare of our team. His is more looking up and out for the organization.
Sure. So talk about a little bit how that's, spanned onto, some of the other businesses you're in. The management side of things, because it seems like that's where it all starts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So really the opportunities kind of come with Jord, who's out looking, seeing what's up. And I would say one of the ones that we've spanned out to outside of 4 Degrees in our maintenance company is North Park Athletic Club, which is a facility out north.
My mom used to manage, was a fitness manager out there. I grew up in that gym.
Really?
Yeah.
That is
actually we joke it's part of your membership is part of your property taxes out north.
Sure. Yeah. It's a definitely a Spokane institute out there.
Yeah, it's definitely a staple. And
for sure.
Probably from the time your mom was there to today, nothing has changed.
Really?
Like it's still, everything still looks the same, still facility, same facility. But even with that one, looking at that opportunity, it was much more like when we're having those discussions, do I think that we can sustain a team? Can we create a culture with what we have going on right now? And we just basically decided, yeah, that's a great opportunity. I'm more so a fitness guy than maybe Jord, even though he claims to.
He's the beer guy?
Yeah, he's definitely the beer guy. He claims to
drink my product.
Yeah, he claims to mountain bike every now and then. He does some stuff down in his basement. But I would say I'm more like the fitness-oriented guy. And so that was kind of right up my alley. And it just looked like another good opportunity to be able to create positive impacts in our community with a bunch of different people.
Absolutely.
Well, and not let it go away. Like, so Jim Snow is awesome, who was the previous purveyor of that. And I think what we were looking at was, man, we preach fitness to all our employees, but what do we do about it? We had a gym behind. Right,
it's pretty great gym. No one uses it except for me.
I know, but I go in there every once in a while. I at least throw a weight around. But I think that was the other one was like, man, if our mission and purpose is to create positive impacts, how are we doing that in this isolated silo downtown? Spokane's so much bigger than that. And so I think that's what pushed a lot of the decision. And once Joel said he had the capacity, that's kind of the last statement. So
Well, and that's great, because that truly is, like you said, a staple in Spokane, and to come in with, new, fresh ideas and leadership and be able to, sustain that for the next 50 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty cool. It seems like a, common theme among what you guys are doing. And so changing gears with that a little bit, let's talk about some of the other industries that you guys have jumped into, the brewery, restaurant industry, bars, and talk to us a little bit about what you guys are doing over there.
Yeah, one of the downsides of real estate is that it's a long-term game, right?
Sure.
So you get lower cash flow, but over an extended period of time, and one day we hope it's worth more. So what we were realizing was we needed cash daily, and ran into Matt Goodwin, who you'll have on this podcast at some point. He's the man, man. And I
don't think I've ever seen Matt stressed out in my life.
Yeah.
You may have, but
seen him once or twice, but not becoming of him. So but he just knows his stuff. And so kind of worked into that. And what we found was, man, there's some efficiencies around this, and you can take these neighborhood spots and really create a community impact. And so we started with there, and it turned into, hey, what do you have margin on? It's making the beer. What if we created a bend scene in Spokane? Started the simplest thought. I was over in Seattle, and I went to pick up a 6-pack at the grocery store, per usual, and grabbed one. I thought, how cool would it be if you picked up your own 6-pack, like of your own beer, and you knew that people were creating community and enjoyment around something you created. And came back, that was 4 years ago. And then we were literally just waiting for the right spot, and that's the old Watts Automotive opened up on the west end. And I thought, man, if we ever had a chance, if we ever won the opportunity, this might be it. And now I hope it's a place people can come, congregate, well, pre-COVID, eventually post-COVID. And our brewers, it just kind of all worked. And I think one of the things we try to do is you just align with the best. And the people that do it, from our brewer to our general manager to our staff, that's what we expect. That's what we look for. And that's what we create. Now now you have more Spokane breweries. There's awesome ones in Spokane. Let's make that a feature. Let's make that a draw to keep growing here. So it was kind of, like I said, Slumdog Millionaire, man. You just kind of slowly roll into it. And whereas like the intent wasn't that you had this awesome thing. Like it was, no, let's create something. Like I hadn't even tasted a beer from our brewer. We were all the way through the project, and he made his first beer. And I think I started crying. Because I'm like, oh my God, that's good. It
was so good.
That's good. Yeah. I can do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was expecting an average product that I had to sell and really push.
Sure.
And then I'm like, oh my God, that's where we need to be. We need to level up Spokane.
Absolutely. So Joel, Jordan's drug you into real estate now. You're doing his property management. Tell me about the beer conversation. All of a sudden, you're opening a brewery. Actually, I want to hear about this.
Oh, man. Yeah. Oh. So you can see I have a Pilsner cracked, haven't taken a sip. I'm not a huge beer guy. But once again,
cheers.
Cheers, yeah.
So we got to do this at some point, right?
Not with water,
a cup
please.
of water.
It's embarrassing.
No?
Come on.
There you
it's
go.
Embarrassing.
There
Come
you
on.
go. Cheers.
Eye contact, right? Make sure the audience can hear the slurps.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it wasn't for the beer. It's definitely for like the business opportunity.
Absolutely.
And I'm super grateful, even though it's my brother, to Jordan for even allowing the opportunity to get involved in something like that. Because our mission at 4 Degrees is to extend that positive impact to our entire community. Well, this is just another outlet to be able to do that. Same thing. I look at North Park. I look at 4 Degrees that way. I look at the Turn Team that way. Any venture that we become a part of, that's more or less why, is like, how do we create positive impacts? And George talks about it a lot, bringing people together. And so that's ultimately what we want to try and do. And I think this is just, I've heard from many people that had the opportunity to go there pre-COVID that this is like a state-of-the-art facility. It's like something they've never seen before. And I would agree. And I've been to a few locations, but to be able to have that outdoor space for community events, for the downtown to get together, it's just a phenomenal space. And also, we've kind of done this over the last 5 years, is just kind of taking something old and making it new. And that is just quite a scene to watch and to be a part of. And so, yeah, I'm kind of more so along for the ride on this one, and I get to defer to Jordan, Matt, and the team on how we're doing and how we're going to get through something like this COVID deal.
Well, you say you're along for the ride. So tell me, though, because the one thing I think I've noticed, I look at, K&H or NAI Black, for instance, and their property management. And it seems like for the longest time in Spokane, these guys were strictly focused on real estate. And I know maybe from a brewery standpoint as a business, you're probably not super involved. You guys got great partners with Matt there. But what about you guys own the building? So you're managing the building, I assume. Does that change any? I mean, is the management of a brewery as a building any different from, say, managing 200 apartment units?
It's definitely different because it's commercial tenants.
Okay.
But I mean, it's same systems in place, same processes as far as rent collection, if you're talking about that kind of thing.
Sure.
But they take care of a lot of the issues that go on in there. And to be quite frank, there's not a lot of issues just because it's brand new. I mean, we took that thing down to brick, essentially like this, all the way out to the walls, and everything's pretty much brand new. So I think, whether that's right or wrong, we'll find out in 15, 20 years. But we've just done that with, I think, all of our buildings, where we just don't want to do it, half-ass and just kind of Band-Aids over things. And we would rather take it down, build something that's going to last for a long time, and then that way we can stamp our name on it and be confident.
Well, and I think Spokane appreciates that because they want less of this, half-assed stuff done. I mean, for forever and ever, we've had, I'm sure as so many slumlords out there that just do the bare minimum to fix something. And I would assume, I mean, when you're coming in and you're putting, capital improvements into a building like that, it makes the management or at least the maintenance costs quite a bit more minimal.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I don't even know that I would necessarily compare it to like what we manage for large multifamily units. I don't think it's necessarily like apples to apples in that scenario. And we're a much smaller, I would say, commercial presence than someone like Black or Kimley and Haygood and that sort of thing. We just manage what we own downtown.
Yeah, and it's awesome. They set a great standard, right? You get to come into a community. This is what I always loved about it, right? Being 36, Joel's 35, is that we get to go look at everybody who's done it and say, hey, what do we love about it? What would we like to improve on it? And what I wanted was something where if you're starting a brewery and you do your SWOT analysis, you had to have come into our brewery at some point. You had to look at the surroundings. You had to taste the beer. You had to say, hey, if we're going to do something, it needs to be better.
Absolutely.
And that's where we look across the board at everything we do is like, hey, if we're going to create something, we're going to create a gym. How do we get the best people doing the best work for the most amount, right? And that I feel like that once we carried that system through, it's allowed us to at least push the envelope because we're over budget on all of them. Every project we're on over budget, especially when we're the operating company.
Absolutely.
Because in our mind, it's, hey, you create a space people want to basically be at. I think the rest kind of solves itself. So I feel like Spokane deserves it. It's what everyone's pushing towards. And I mean, it's probably why you have the podcast. I mean, there's no catalyst if there's nobody catalyzing, right? I mean, what are we talking about if nobody's really pushing that forward? And I think, like I said, you have the Dave Black, you have the Larry Stone, you have the Doug. I mean, they're all
keep calling them out. They're all going to be on here.
Well, eventually.
All the players.
Because how awesome would it be to hear from them?
Absolutely.
So instead of a closed book, why don't we sit and look at this open book of, man, I'm over budget on these projects. I didn't anticipate fire code and all these things. Hey, what if you did this? And if we could change that to this, I have no idea what stops Spokane if you have that kind of environment.
Well, talk about your mindset a little bit, because when you talk about, looking at what people have done before you, one thing I've noticed about 4 Degrees is you built a wonderful residential brokerage firm, right? You can compete with anybody there. But your property management company is really ran like the big commercial firms. Yeah. And it seems like you guys have really taken the best of both worlds and put that together. And I would argue that, rather than saying, hey, here's the format, this is how we do, this is how everyone does things, let's follow that. You guys are looking at it and saying, how do we don't need to be held with these limits of how it's been done in the past. Let's come up with, new ways to do this and innovate.
Well, 100%. So you're not looking at somebody saying, hey, we want to follow you.
Sure.
You're looking at somebody saying, what are you doing right? What's something that makes sense for us to continue to do? And what are things we can do better? And I feel like that's what levels up any industry.
Absolutely.
Is everybody continually pushing to do better, not starving people out to where you don't have the competition. So you maintain something like that. And I think that's what I've seen is that now you've watched, NAI's doing it, K&H too. I mean, they're all awesome. I love the brand. I love the logo. And now what if you had 10 of those pushing at this highly competitive level? You can't help but grow. My statement of Spokane is there's just no forced pace, right? You go to Seattle, there's no 3 stars. You can't be a 3-star. 3 stars
not.
go away. If you're not a 4-star, you don't compete. What if Spokane was built on 4 and 5 stars? That's my goal. That's what I think we can get it to. And I think where all of a sudden it's like even our lowest competition is still better than most areas. And yeah, like I said, you already have front runners doing that. So I feel like if we can play our part and help continue that, geez, man, it gets exciting at that point.
It is exciting. So, Jordan, tell me a little bit about the backyard. That was your first restaurant venture, right?
Yeah.
Or boiler room or backyard?
I feel like they're all blurred together.
Yeah,
they all start with
sure,
B.
Sure.
They all start with B at that point.
But talk about a little bit about these competitive advantage partnerships that you've got, and talk specifically with boiler room and the backyard and how you guys were able to break into something like that. Coming from the real estate business.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good question, but really it's not breaking into real estate, it's breaking into a partnership.
Sure.
So when I look at it, I don't have 4 Degrees if I don't have Joel.
Okay.
I don't have Backyard, Barnwood, Checkerboard, Brick West if I don't have Matt.
Okay.
And so when I look at it, it's why not assemble the greatest team
The dream team.
and then go create. So for me, it's not even real estate. You sit here and say, hey, 4 Degrees real estate. We're not a real estate company. We're a marketing company that peddles real estate. And we try to create impact through that. And I think that's one of the differences you'll see is that, do we want to own a building? Sure. I just talked to a guy where he's like, why do you ever own a building? Why don't you just sell them and capitalize on the income? I'm like, I don't know. Everybody said own a building. I mean, that makes sense, right?
It does make sense.
When I look at it, it's like, man, you just assemble the right team. That's what it takes. Now from there, it's like, okay, I trust that Joel is going to run something when we get there. And so when we looked at restaurants, literally it was to the point of, hey, we need something that cash flows daily. We had found this opportunity. The first one was called the Broadway Tavern. Oh. Literally, there was a stabbing three weeks before closing. They said, do you still want to close? And I said, is the man all right? They said yes. So I said, yes, let's close. Because obviously nobody died.
Right?
I said, nobody died. So, and moved on that. And what we were looking for was a site that also had future development potential. And when I look at that West Broadway into, we're not even calling it Kendall Yards anymore. What do we call that? West Central.
Yeah.
Right. So when I look at that, I'm like, man, there's opportunity here because this is an area on the fringe of developing. And so what we look at are not your targeted markets. We started doing a few downtown, which is a little different. We did a 500 plus unit storage building, which completes in April. We've done a conversion of the old Sterling Savings Bank building, 21 units with retail and pretty cool speakeasy concept in the basement. That'll finish. But most of our stuff is targeting periphery areas, which is why the west end of Spokane was so appealing, was that it's just one of those areas where if you can inject enough value, I think people will see it at that point. And I don't think Spokane is early adopters by any means, but as soon as they see it, they get behind it. And I think that's why COVID to me is less of a big deal, because we just have such a loyalty to the brands here that I feel confident that we can sustain, stay open, stay relevant. The other side of this looks really awesome.
Well, tell me a little bit about the West Side in general, because to me, that is like in my opinion, one of your biggest accomplishments between the two of you. That side of downtown was just, it was a ghost town there for a little while. Yeah. And you guys come in, you got the, Parkview West in there. Mm-hmm. You guys got the brewery in there now. You got Lolo Lofts coming up. Yep. And it's almost now to the point where I think you guys are giving the downtown core, a run for its money. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about building a community down there.
Well, you discounted the greatest achievement. Joel jumped out of an airplane. Let's not discount that.
I didn't see that.
We'll get back to that one, but okay. No, when you look at it, it's you have a boundary of the edge, right, of the riverside. Sure. You have 2nd Avenue that almost runs like a freeway, and so you have this little weird pocket that comes to a point and then heads into Brown's Addition. So when we looked at it, there was this amazing view back at downtown, and you had a lot of people kind of pushing for activity down there, and we were able to meet kind of one owner that had a pretty good presence down there and bought all of his properties essentially.
Wow.
and his name's Chuck Little. Awesome guy. Like, again, I think people in Spokane don't give enough credit to people in Spokane for really wanting more. But we were able to coordinate a deal with him. We have an investor named Scott Isaac who just really wants to see that kind of growth and that potential. And he said, I do believe he was laying on a beach in Mexico as well when I pitched him the idea. Something about beaches in Mexico. It's just really a place you should really go. Yeah. Hey, want a great idea? Go to a beach in Mexico. And he said, yeah, let's do this thing. And now you go up there and it's a very thoughtful, driven, and I'm a small piece to that puzzle, but the team came together, and I think what you'll see down there allows us to activate it. And if you go to big cities, this isn't new. Like we took a concept that you'd see in Pioneer Square and just created our own Pioneer Square.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what we were pushing for was don't recreate. Let's find something that complements. I think too many times in Spokane, we look for things that essentially will cannibalize areas. And we thought, what if we create an area where people would come drink here, but then go down to the restaurant area and eat dinner, right? And I think as we started moving through there, that's kind of where it took form. And then there was just something. You look at those smokestacks lit up at night. I mean, that's on the market. We talked about looking at that one.
That's on the market right now.
Yeah, different story for another time.
Wow.
Looked at that one, but you look at like just lit up at night. Spokane is a pretty impressive city, and I think too few times, unless you're driving home, and it's the most relieving sight, right? Coming down the hill, you see all the lights. But what if you lived in that, right? So our tower faces all of that every single night, and so you get to see that. And I've stayed there a few nights. If you're ever looking for an Airbnb, we have a couple there, but we have something special here to offer. And I think for too long we've been Spokane instead of what I think are growing into. So.
Seattle's little brother.
Yeah, you say Seattle. I think we're different than that. And I feel like what I mean by that is that I feel like we're so locally grown that there's sustainability in what we're doing.
Sure.
We don't need a Fortune 500 company to create what we've created, right? So no market does what we're doing without a major employer literally coming in and injecting it. Boise.
And we don't necessarily need that or want that, rather.
Yeah. And I think that's where you're going to see the growth pains, if you call them. Is you're going to have half the population doesn't want it. Half the population comes in here and says, why haven't you done this yet?
Absolutely.
And I think that's going to be a struggle, but that's a struggle I think I'm on board for.
So you guys, and you've got the West Side going. You bought 9 buildings downtown in the last couple of years, 7 buildings in the last downtown or downtown in the last
I should know
couple
that
years?
number.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And now North Park is one of the newer purchases you guys have made, projects that you guys manage. So Joel, tell us a little bit about North Park and just the management and what you guys are doing, bringing that back.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Jordan mentioned it at the very beginning, but I feel like we're kind of just carrying the torch from what Jim did so well for so long, to where it's really ours to mess up.
But you said nothing has changed. I mean, is that
true.
absolutely true? I can't believe that's true.
Probably nothing. Just the carpet. All the carpet.
Okay.
And the branding.
All the carpet is still there.
But we got pickleball now. It used to just be tennis back in the day.
That's true. So a couple conversions probably happened, I don't know, early 80s, late 90s. I'm not even sure. But the majority of it is still the same. And I think, a lot of members that we have, and, George talks about loyalty. There's a lot of loyal members, and we're talking like, legacy type members where their kids are now coming and that sort of thing. And I think, they just really appreciate, the cleanliness. They appreciate the size. They appreciate the dynamic of what North Park has to offer, because you could go there and swim, or like you said, play pickleball or basketball or just work out or whatever you want to do. And pre-COVID, I think we were the only fitness center in Spokane that had a family room. I'm pretty sure we could have been the only one. But I mean, it's like something I've never seen before this. But it was really just a space where people just kind of hung out, right? Members got to know members and that sort of thing. So you're really building like a tight community. And then shortly thereafter, we purchased, COVID hit. And so it's kind of been like how do we...
Time to own a gym.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we get through this, essentially? How do we navigate this? And we're still working on some things right now, probably more information to come. But yeah, I think I still believe it's a good investment. And even for that purpose that George said, where, we're sustaining something on the north side that's been a staple for, I guess, since 75.
Really?
I think
75.
75 is when it was built. Yeah.
So do you see yourself going into anywhere else in the fitness industry? I mean, the Spokane club's hurting pretty bad right now, from what I understand.
Tough building.
I hear that they'd like to have you guys come help them out.
Really? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if the opportunity came up, I think the team down at 4 Degrees kind of jokes, when are we going to build the South Park?
Oh,
Because we got North Park, and then they're wondering when South Park's coming online. But I
maybe
think
the Spokane Club South.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I think replicate a building like that, I don't even know if it makes sense right now.
Yeah.
But
It's a big building.
90,000
massive.
square feet. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
90,000.
So talk to us about North Park. How does a deal, Jordan, how does a deal work out like that? I'm sure you can't, you've got, certain NDAs and different things. You can't go into total specifics, but how does a deal like that work out?
The beauty of this is I can go to any deal anytime. I told
Beautiful.
somebody that,
Tell
I'm
us.
like, yeah, you call me anytime.
How's it work?
So we showed up. Jim had the owner, the previous seller, who came to me and said, "Hey, can you list this for me?" And he started going through the numbers, and like I said, we're balancing daily cash flow
So
with
talk
long-term.
about, let me slow you down though. Talk to me about Jim comes to you, because you guys are not initially from Spokane, right?
Oh no, we're from Moses. Well,
Moses
Moses
we're
Lake.
from a different
Let's
place.
claim Moses
A different
Lake.
place.
Okay.
We're gonna claim it.
So you've been in Spokane. Did you move up for college?
College,
or
yeah. So I've been here since 2002.
Okay.
So
So you've
been here a
built your
little
name
while.
in the real estate industry. You guys have 4 degrees.
And I married well. That
You
was the
married
other
well.
one. So
That's
she
always
connected me
something-
pretty
that's-
quickly.
That's the most important thing you can do, right?
It's like a royal marriage. It worked out well.
Perfect. Yeah, she's smoke show, right?
Yeah,
Nice.
it works.
Nice.
You get lucky once in your life, right?
Just once.
Just once.
So tell me about, so Jim gets hold of you, right?
Yeah.
So how's that conversation go?
Yeah, so he said, "Hey, I've reached out to a few people, haven't gotten back. Can you come down?" I was referred by somebody I know that you
Okay.
guys could possibly help me. And then, like I said, we're so unique where like I pay people's brokers fees. Like we don't even have to be the broker on a deal. And so we went in and he goes, "Hey, I need a solution here." And he's like, "Gym people don't have money.
Sure.
Money people don't want gyms." I'm referring to the gymnasium, not Jim himself. Yeah. And he, and so I go
Pardon the
home and I
pun.
go, "Joel, you'll never believe this, but like this guy wants to sell." And like I could picture Joel being Jim Snow one day, and there in his athletic gear, running a gym.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh no, like 100%. I could see him walking away from 4 degrees and just like focusing on this gym. And we walked through, and I said, "Man, there's no such thing as coincidence." And we literally are in a spot where like, how do we continue this impact? But we're really relegated to this downtown area. That's where most of our impact is. And he goes, "Dude, I'll do it." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll run that thing." And so we sat down, and it made sense. And then all of a sudden, for those members, they kind of became part of our family. And we just said, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to do this at a high level. And so we were able to structure a deal where it had some seller financing in there.
Beautiful.
With a kind of a different payoff. And that's where kind of trusting the party on the other side became such a big deal. And so for us, it's less about what we pay, right? Again, 36, 35. We need deals to pay off in 30 years. 30 years, which means we can break even, we can lose a little up front, as long as we know whatever we're doing is driving us towards kind of a goal of 30 years. And so,
What is that goal in 30 years?
yeah, that's a good question. We're supposed to ask that
Moving
last.
target?
You're supposed to ask that last. I've been thinking about this the whole time we've been on the podcast.
Let's save it.
Yeah, what's crazy about it is it evolves. Started with a $10,000 a month in passive income. I still remember writing that down. I pulled up the napkin that had it, and I'm like, "Oh my God, what were you doing then?"
A lot of people would love to have $10,000 a month
it's amazing.
in passive income.
It's amazing. I think most people, it's when you look at it, it's not based on what somebody else wants, right? It's your goal of what you feel like you can do in that similar situation. And that's where what's happened is these doors have been opened in between Joel's efficient management. So he didn't say it, but no, he runs 4 degrees.
Absolutely.
So I show up to 4 degrees, and then Joel tells me, "Hey, this is kind of what we're doing
He
here."
keeps you on track.
Yeah, 100%, right? I'm hopefully an asset for what we do at 4 degrees, but he runs it. He runs North Park, and that's how it works. That's how it's supposed to work. And then when we look at it, it's like, okay, you're creating these goals. Well, what do you want them aligned with? They're always going to start with money first, because that's what everyone tells you should have. Then they're going to move into this part where it's like, well, it's money plus change and impact. And I think if you ask most people, that's what they want. It's just hard to do that when you don't have what you need. And so I still remember that as 10,000. And now I actually don't even know if I have a money goal. right? It's sitting in here, and if one podcast can reach 5 more people than I could have reached by myself, we're going to support that podcast.
Absolutely.
And if it's not my voice, it's Joel's voice, it's somebody's voice. We'll get out there, and hey, I'm just here to drink a few beers and tell you what I went through to get there, because it's a lot of sacrifice.
Well, I love it. And it makes a difference, I think, in the community. I think a lot of people want to hear this story and they want to know, because in Spokane, we still have that small town feel. We still have that community, and people really support guys like you who are out there making this a place that people want to live in.
Yeah.
So that's huge.
I mean, you have us on a podcast, right? You have these amazing people that do crazy things in Spokane and feel privileged to be on it, right?
Absolutely. Well, let's change gears here real quick. So talk to me a little bit about Joel, the president election. We've got Joe Biden coming in with talk of more business regulation, higher taxes. Maybe from a regulation standpoint, how does that affect the property management business? I mean, are you guys even thinking about that? I mean, do you guys have the blinders on? Tell me about this a little bit.
Yeah, so I'll kind of, I guess, up front, I'm not a huge, political guy. I mean,
Sure.
I'm following it and seeing what's going to affect our businesses and even things with like the PPP or any kind of, federal funding. I just,
Absolutely.
on the back end, there's going to be something that happens. And I'm not a glass ball kind of guy like this cat over here. But I know there's something that's going to happen, whether they increase our, small business taxes or whatever that looks like. I think for me, it's much more staying present in the present, right? And I have the luxury of being able to do that because someone like Jord is thinking through those things, like what's it going to impact in a year or 2 years from now? What do we need to be preparing for? Because at the same time, we have a team of people that rely on us to continue to provide direction.
Absolutely.
To continue to provide this sense of, hey, things are going to be okay, even though we're shut down on certain fronts. Things are going to be okay because we've come up with a plan. And I think it's a pretty good plan. We're going to start moving forward. So there's never any kind of like stagnation or any kind of exaggeration of what's going on around us, like in the political scene. It's just much more take it for what it is. And then we're going to build a plan to get through it, to get around it, to do whatever we need to do in order to help succeed and to allow our team to continue to win. Like that's the idea, is keep providing wins for them. And so like I said, I get the luxury of not having to necessarily worry about things like that. I think Jord would probably, be more of a voice to the political side, I guess.
Glass ball guy.
Yeah.
I want to hear. So from a development standpoint, from a business M&A standpoint, what's going on? I mean, with COVID, the restaurant business, a brewery, you guys are set up pretty well, I think, while things were open to get people in there. But talk about new business and what you guys are doing because you're always expanding. Talk about what you're doing to be able to expand now, what effects COVID's having on your current businesses, and how you're able to withstand this stuff right now.
Yeah. So, when we expand, it's based off previous business. So our businesses are getting hammered.
Sure.
They're getting hammered at every turn, right? Fortunately, we were able to pivot and have the resources to go into canning and expansion of our brewery. Like I said, we're either the idiots who doubled down during COVID on our brewery, or we're the geniuses that doubled down on our brewery during COVID. And when I look at it, the $2 trillion doesn't come at it comes at a cost. The $600 extra in unemployment comes at a cost. So you drain one fund. Well, that fund's funded by small businesses. And when they come back online to have to do this, there's no way that's adequately funded. And so what we're anticipating on our end is doubling of our unemployment tax. Support the program. I do believe it served a need. But anytime something like this is released, it was released in SBA loans for the most part. So those are all still due. It was released in delaying or forbearance of mortgage, which still due, right? So all we did was delay in the inevitable. And when I look at it, it's you better be shored up as a business to be able to withstand the next 6 months after this thing's lifted, because that's when you're going to get hit the hardest. And that's when banks and everybody else is going to expect you to be at that level. So for me, the crystal ball sucks. Like when I look at it, I think rates are low. You're doing development projects. You're probably in a good spot because you're going to be introducing it to the market when you're not having delinquencies in the double digits.
Sure.
Right. Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts, restaurant business in general? There are guys that are out there right now looking to, bring something on, say in the in the spring, for instance, do you think we can get through this in a reasonable amount of time?
Yeah, but just pad your reserves, right?
Yeah.
So I think if you're open right now, you're trying to stay relevant.
Are we going to see more, new restaurateurs come through
100%.
at the end of this and take some of these guys that, didn't make it through out, or what's that going to look like?
100%. So what you're going to do is whenever you do a restaurant, brewery, whatever the analysis, you're going to do a rooftop analysis. You're going to do a demographic analysis. And right now, Spokane trends well in the rooftop and the market demographics for restaurants.
Okay.
Right? Somebody once told me if you can make a restaurant work in Spokane, you can make it work anywhere.
Test market, right?
Yeah, test market. And I think that we've moved from a test market to a market that's waiting for better product. And so when I look at it, no, I think you're going to see people move. The issue, though, is that unless you're backed right, most restaurateurs don't always have the backing to introduce the concept. Like Chad White, amazing at what he does. And I'm glad, hopefully he stays funded for the rest of his life.
Hopefully
we have a fund
amazing.
to fund him for the rest of his life because he creates. Adam Hegstad. I mean, all of those guys do it. But when you look at it, there's no funding. You're not going to have funding for 2+ years. You can't even get a building refinance right now if it has a restaurant in it. Play that out, right? Normally you could have bought with 25% down. And now you're having this situation where we want them here. Social media tells us we want them here. But their sales are losing money every month. And that's where the disconnect is to me. Because I just don't see how that withstands as long as this thing continues to go. And I think it's a health crisis, right? I mean, it's a big deal. And so for me, that's
and I think what's
deal.
interesting too, and I've when COVID first hit, it was hard to kind of talk to some friends because on the real estate side it is still doing really well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like we have a lot of our brokers who are having some of their best years,
Yeah.
right? And then to go talk to a friend or somebody else who's in a different industry and they just lost everything. So that's a very challenging place to be in. So you got to be very cognizant of who you're sharing that information with. But even on the management side, at the very beginning, we kind of curtailed a little bit or planned for a potential decrease or increase in delinquency. But fortunately, we didn't see but 1 or 2% added to that. So once again, going through this time, I would say 4 Degrees as a whole has been doing fine, been doing well. But then you pull in like the restaurants or the brewery, you pull in North Park, which that's probably most visual, where it's like all gyms shut down. Right. And so now it's a matter of looking at, okay, are there any loopholes? What's going on here? Like, what can we do a little bit different to still offer fitness to our clients? And kind of going back on one of the earlier questions, the reason I love fitness is because I know what it does for us mentally. I know what it does for us physically, and I know what it does for humans emotionally.
Absolutely.
Like it is, to me, it's part of the solution to this problem we have going on right now. And so that's where it's a little bit tricky because as a business owner, you got to be cognizant of what you're saying, the mediums you're putting it out on and that kind of thing. Yeah. Even though every single member at my 5 a.m. crew was willing to go out and picket or do whatever they needed to on the last Monday before shutting down. And so, of course, we obviously love and the support that we've received specifically at North Park from our members. But every single industry is impacted just a little bit differently right now.
So Joel used the word loophole. It was more the guidelines as set out, and then we found a solution.
Absolutely.
That met it. So the issue, right, you see is that like we deal with the employee ramifications. We deal with the member ramifications. So I understand like that side of it. And it's that we're always in the middle, in the worst spot, balancing, seeing what it's doing to the economy and realizing what it's doing to the economy and taking the hits of what it's doing to the economy with understanding, protecting people and what that means. And so it's just, I don't think there's a great answer to COVID that makes sense, except for we're going to look to find and meet people where they're at. So it's such a weird dynamic that way.
So Joel, you might say that maybe it's a little contradictory that we have a disease out there that's based on having a healthy immune system and they're shutting gyms down where you can go work on that stuff.
So that's where George says no comment.
Yeah,
probably.
thank you. Thank you.
All right, fair enough.
I asked him to at least say that.
We'll do that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That works for me. So, Jordan, talk to me a little bit about Spokane in general, what you see for the future. I mean, people have talked about, a credit crunch. The real estate markets are down in, places like New York City and LA and some of these big places. Talk to me a little bit about, are we insulated here? We've had a lot of people say that. Do you see a credit crunch coming? What do you see for the next 3 to 5 years in real estate here in Spokane?
Yeah, so all I can reflect on is what happened, right? So we had 1 month of no income and how many businesses went bankrupt, right? So it's hard to tell if we were already close to a credit crunch without COVID. So when I look at Spokane, we trend well in migration, which is new money coming into the area.
Absolutely.
Not creating money though, but spending money. So that's where COVID hurts a lot, is because we would have had a lot of people coming in and spending the money. So when I look at Spokane, so I went to Boise. I confess, I went down there just because
You're cheating on us.
I know. It almost felt like it a little bit, but Barbacoa was so good.
It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
Right. And I went down there looking for the magical serum. It's what Spokane's been missing. We have homeless. We're a little tough in regulations. We don't have the demographic, whatever stat somebody gives you. And then I went down there and realized, you know what? We do. We have all the parts that can make this such an amazing community. We have a little more history. We don't allow us to tear down old buildings, which would have sped this up. We don't have a Fortune 500 company, but you know what we have is the most resilient population I've ever seen. And so when I look at it, we're doubling down on Spokane. I think when we look to Boise, it's because I want to push this brand at a high level. And one of the ways is getting into another major metro. But I think you talk about Fairchild looking to expand even to their levels of what they're doing. You have all the right, on paper, we have all the right things. And I think that's what the next one is the groups that are there is stepping up and able to actually do them.
So get specific a little bit. Like, where is the opportunity right now in Spokane? Value add property, industrial, we hear about multifamilies, you know, on fire right now.
Yeah.
Where's the opportunity?
Yeah, what's fun is that somebody once told me never tell everybody the opportunity, but then I realized if I tell them,
you're on the podcast.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's like
it's not going
to anybody else. So
that's not your style anyway.
Yeah, so I mean,
everything.
So I look for flexible zoning. So for me, the East Sprague, so not all the way to where Checkerboard is, where we just bought, but like between Hamilton and the other one, you have two developments going in that should go. If they don't go, I'll buy it from. I'm on the podcast telling that, because they should go. Now,
you heard it here, guys.
Now move up another block, another 2 blocks. Well, you still have a similar zoning. So what are some buildings you can capitalize on there and go vertical? And I think where we're at vertical, we did the 7-story tower and we were around $200 a foot. Well, one of the fears is trying to get that market value out of it. But I think that's an area where people can capitalize with some retail, some office, some amenities that service those units. I like that. I think
and there's nothing vertical there right now, right?
Nothing vertical. Catalyst Center, which is amazing. If you ever get to drive by it, I just park and look at it.
And
it's
that's
amazing.
CLT, right? Cross-laminated timber.
It is.
So cool.
I mean, I feel like you did your research. This is sweet.
I love that stuff.
Bowden Construction did that one. They did such a good job. And you have Lars doing the Lord's work over in the U District. You have the new medical center. So what I hope and I see is like you have that biomed med coming in, becomes a culture that we create here, is that this is the hotbed for that. So I look at that area. There's pockets of the valley I think still have some room to move. Jim Frank's doing amazing work over on Liberty Lake, running the River District all the way out. I think Airway Heights is another opportunity, but it's the one everyone's looking at. I told somebody it's like Lord of the Rings. It's like, where's the eye not looking? And that's what I try to eventually target. So for us, we're looking the Monroe corridor. I don't quite know if market's quite there yet. For us,
what about the arena at Emerson Garfield neighborhood that Bobby Brett and Chris Patton were talking about?
Yeah, I mean they had an unfortunate circumstance of having the
homeless shelter
essentially going next door. And the idea is I walked it with them. It's an amazing property essentially where they could do some awesome things, and I hope they will. What we're trying to find, I think, Chris always talks about the good neighbor ordinance, and if we can get some of that stuff in place, it makes a lot of sense. But
I'd like it down here.
Yeah, we have exactly right. And I think that's the one where I think as we get closer, you're going to see more people step up to that kind of a requirement when they come in the space and look at that. Like we have, is it Vanessa Behan building the 4-story? It's a beautiful building, right? What does that bring? What does that create? And I think it's just thinking about what that does for your area. And so when we're looking, I still love downtown. I think it's going to rebound well. So we're looking at a couple of buildings down here, and then the North Bank. I think with what Larry's going to do with those towers, I think it recreates the skyline. And I mean, who doesn't want to recreate a skyline? I mean, that's like the end goal for everything. We always build 2 stories. I'm like, there's no skyline. Like, how am I going to do this? Right. And so I think with Spokane, the issue will be is getting them at a price competitive to what you can actually rent it for. So the downside of Spokane, someone once told me this about the difference between Seattle and Spokane is in Seattle, everyone tells you how much they paid for something. In Spokane, they tell you how little they paid for something.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And that's where our crux is that we're trying to drive the prices, but we don't have rental rates that justify them.
Do you see the influx of population coming in from places like, Seattle, San Francisco, all over the West Coast, really all over the country coming here, and our, huge mismatch with supply and demand in properties right now? Do you see that driving it?
100%. So all of a sudden, what drives that is all of a sudden, if the cheapest house I can buy is $2,000 a month, what does that do to rental rates?
Through the roof.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what you're going to run into. And I think we keep talking about this affordable housing crisis, and then we have these committees that are supposed to be talking about affordable housing crises. And then we keep talking about affordable housing crisis, but we don't do anything about affordable housing crisis, right? And I think that's where you're going to see some of the slowness to adopt from Spokane be like the saving grace.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's the weirdest. It's hard for me. Therefore, I'm going to Boise for a little bit of time because I need to move at a faster pace. But I think some of the things I get frustrated with Spokane will end up being the saving grace of Spokane. And I think when you turn that sports complex on, you turn the arena on, if I can make any bid to bring that thing downtown, the football fields and stuff, I think that, what are we missing?
Absolutely. So tell us about, both of you guys. I want to hear, what is the ultimate goal? We're getting towards the end of the podcast. We're here now. I've been ready. I know you've been thinking about it. Joel, tell me what's the ultimate goal for you?
It's a tricky question. I don't know that, kind of like Jord, I don't know that I necessarily monetize.
Moving target.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, moving target. I think, man, the ultimate goal, it's to continue doing what we're doing. It's continue to, influence the lives of those that are around us. So like within our just 4 Degrees organization, we have 36 W-2s and 68 agents, right? That is a phenomenal opportunity that God's given us to be able to bless them, to be able to serve them, to be able to help develop them. So one of the big things I like to do is talk about leadership, and not necessarily leadership in the real estate industry, but what about leadership at home? Or what about
Absolutely.
leadership in the community? Or, there's so many different ways to apply that. And so I think for me, there's my level of, fulfillment or filling my buckets up is when I get to see somebody take it to the next level, or I get to see somebody do something that they never thought was possible for themselves. And so, I don't know, that might sound like a cheesy answer, but for me, that's kind of how I gauge it.
And I think that's a common theme. Among the brokers and employees that I'm familiar with at Ford, including myself. Honestly, like you guys truly do inspire people. That's why we wanted to have you guys on the podcast. And I think that Jordan and I have had this conversation before about if you've got, everything in line at home, if you're happy with your wife and your kids and you're not, working just to, fill a bank account or to, just fill some hedonistic need that you have, and you're out there and you've got a fulfilled life and you're happy, you can do, sky's the limit. Mm-hmm. So tell me.
I think mine shifted from money, which would have did drive me for a decade, basically. I felt like you could never have enough of it. And I think I woke up one day and realized what it took to get there. And I think the difference now is I have a triple bottom line. Like I need whatever we do to yes, have a return monetarily. I need it to impact something we're doing, and I need it to impact the community. So that's not a normal triple bottom line. There's no energy. I will focus on that, and I will make them energy efficient. But for me, those are the 3 things where if we're not doing a project that has an impact beyond what we're doing in that project, we don't do it. So if you bring me a project and you're like, Jordan, 140 units out here in the valley, we'll say, okay, but we probably won't invest on it. But if you bring me one that says, hey, we're taking this area of town, if we can bring 140 units, the tax revenue goes up, and now they can afford to fund plowing of these streets, and now it's something else, that's where you'll find us.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful. And that's why I wanted to have you guys on the podcast here, because you truly are making a difference in the community. And that's what we really want to get across is that, we've got a lot of wonderful business owners out here. Excuse my my headphones. A lot of wonderful business owners out here and a lot of wonderful developers, including you guys. And it's just amazing. And we want to tell the stories of what you guys are doing out here for not just, your families, but also for the community, the larger community in general, and for Spokane and the greater, Spokane, Coeur d'Alene area. So that kind of wraps up the podcast for today, guys. This was great. I really appreciate you having you guys out.
Yeah, I appreciate you having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Feel
you.
honored.
Yeah, wonderful. Good. Yeah. Well, that's the third episode of Catalyst. Thanks, Spokane, for watching. We'll catch you guys here next week on episode 4.